So today, my name is Dawn Ellis-Mobbs, and I'm really
Where's your thing
excited
down
to
here?
welcome you to our webinar
It
today
doesn't.
on relational arts programming in online spaces. So today it's relational arts programming in online spaces, which is actually a really fascinating topic, especially since we were catapulted into the COVID world. And in many places, we are dealing with this. And many people are offering arts programs in this way. So we have Taylor and Katia, both of who are members or have been past presenters at one of our masterclass offerings. So super excited to have them here today. And just a reminder that we are very thankful to the George Lunan Foundation for their generous support of our webinars. And because of their support, it means that we are able to offer our webinars at no cost to participants. In our webinar series, which, as you know, is the second Wednesday of every month from 3:30 to 4:30, we have an upcoming one called Recruiting Musicians in Care Spaces. So we are very blessed to have Deb Chandler, who is the Executive Director from Concerts in Care, coming to us to discuss about recruiting musicians in care. And again, these are the 8 core programs and offerings that we have at Room 217. Super thrilled for those of you that haven't been with us or heard at our last webinar that we are having the Music Care Conference in Ottawa, which is local to a lot of us. So that's really exciting. We have 2 main partners, University of Ottawa Music and Health Institute, and as well as Kathy Armstrong and some other faculty members from Carleton University. And we also have a masterclass coming up on February 16th, which actually is a connection from our past conference in BC. I'll just fast forward to here. David Hatfield ran a very, very popular workshop at our BC Music Care Conference. And so we're thrilled to invite him for a masterclass. And actually, the irony, I'll just say, is Taylor and Katia actually presented last year, 1 year ago, at our February masterclass on compassion fatigue and a response through the arts, which was super exciting. And so this year in February, we're doing kind of a special masterclass with David Hatfield from BC. He will present a 1-hour masterclass where you'll be invited to play with your voice in new and interesting ways, drawing inspiration from within and from others. We'll also look at a very simple way that the voice can be used in care to provide comfort, support relationship, and provide shifts in mood and atmosphere. So again, this masterclass, I think you'll find some cool practical tips, just like the class today in our webinar. And as always, our music care training level 1 coming up in April. We actually are in the middle of a level 1 happening today on another Zoom call somewhere. And level 2, March 8th and 9th. So if you have level 1 and are looking for level 2, you can still join in, just about a month away. And level 3, we have an intake March 30th, finishing on May 12th. And so what is today about? A little bit about our speakers. Taylor is a PhD student at University of Waterloo, a music therapist, a singer-songwriter, and as I said, no stranger to the Room 217 community. She has an incredible virtual learning studio that you can find at musiccare.org under the Learn portfolio. Taylor is one of our presenters, singer-songwriters, and her VLS is actually quite exciting, so you can check that out if you wish. And in addition to her work as a PhD student in aging, health, and well-being, she is a graduate of U of T's Master of Arts in Music and Health. And Katia, her colleague today, is the director of the Bitove Method. She oversees the management and growth of this not-for-profit with the mission of supporting persons with dementia and their care partners by offering creative, respectful, and relational spaces, the topic of the day, for community and engagement. She completed a Master's of Arts at the University of Waterloo in the Department of Recreation and Leisure with a focus on culture change in long-term care. She's also a fabulous freelance artist, terribly creative, as we saw in the masterclass a year ago, did an outstanding job, and a clinical research analyst for the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute. And so we're going to kick off the webinar. I'm going to kick it off and pass the torch over to Taylor and Katia, and thank you so much.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Katia, do you want to share the PowerPoint and we'll get started? So welcome. So today we're going to be talking about relational arts programming in online spaces, and specifically the Beethoven method and what they do, and a research project we did with the University of Waterloo in collaboration with the Beethoven method about exploring the transition between in-person relational arts programming to online. So you can just go to the next slide. So we're going to start today with Katia presenting on relational theories and relational art. So what really is at the forefront of why we do relational arts. And then I'll be giving an overview of the study, and we'll explore the challenges of online relational arts programming, tools for translating relational arts to online spaces, the possibilities of online relational arts programming, some recommendations, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. So I will pass it over to you, Katia.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Dawn, for such a warm introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Katia. I'm really excited today to talk about relational caring. It is a topic very near and dear to my heart. Relational caring has its roots in a lot of advocacy around how do we essentially rehumanize care. So it looks to some of the problems that have been identified in the cultures of care that currently exist in a widespread way, but also very specifically in long-term care and dementia care settings. So relational caring really just kind of brings the attention back towards relationships and how we exist in relationship, even in care settings, and especially in care settings, one could argue. And this looks at how we can do compassionate, authentic, reciprocal caring in care contexts. That's my quick summary, as quick as I can make it. So to expand on all of that a little bit, the key principles of relational caring are that compassionate relationships are at the core of human wellness. So it kind of puts forward the idea that it is relationships that make us thrive in life. You will hear the term growth promoting relationships, safe relationships, reciprocal, authentic, meaningful, but really looking at it as kind of the missing piece and why healthcare settings and caring settings in general can feel so clinical, so cold, so alienating. Then also that human beings learn, grow, and thrive best in mutual and reciprocal relationships. It focuses on deep connection, interdependence, and collaboration, and is attentive to the range of relationships that shape experiences. And this one is a really important one in understanding what relational caring really means, because it's easy to kind of assume it's just about, you and me, the in between people kind of relationships, but it also looks at everything as relationships. So your relationship to space, your relationship to institutions, your relationship to yourself, to your body, to nature. And once you start opening everything up and looking at it as relationships, it just really helps you see the person in front of you in a very different way. So relational caring involves attending to humanity and humanness, focusing intentionally on relationships, reflecting on what is occurring in the moment, creating a safer space, collaborating and working with one another, and being self-aware, reflective, and advocating for change. So a lot of relational caring really kind of looks like, I don't know, it's hard to describe in very specific terms. Taylor and I were kind of trying to come up with specific examples. But there's, for example, a shift from caring for, so like I'm here to care for you and having that power dynamic, towards caring with. And making space for other people to care for you in return. It's about being very attuned in the moment, so really going with the flow, reading the person in front of you and seeing what their needs are in that moment. And we see that become so very important in the dementia care context, because the moment does change. pretty, sometimes it can change very dramatically. And so I'm kind of meeting people there, creating that safe space for that reality to be okay. And then collaborating and working with each other, that brings us into the extension of it also being between team members. So a relational caring environment would also mean that you are relational with the people you're working with. It's not only for other people, it can be your teammates, your boss, your employees, whatever that may be, people's family members, people's PSWs. If you're in the context that I'm in, we have people come in with care partners is the language we use. And so it really is about everybody. And Taylor, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to jump in and add that I'm glossing over here.
No, thank you. I think that was, it is really hard to put into straightforward terms what relational caring looks like. For me, as a music therapist, when I was working in long-term care, and I actually didn't learn about relational caring until my PhD. So I was very much centered in a person-centered care model in long-term care. And so what that looks like is I'm still doing care for somebody. So I would not put myself in the relationship like I would in a relational caring context. So there would be many boundaries that I would have on myself because we're taught that having mutual vulnerability in clinical spaces specifically is unethical. And not to say that person-centered care is unethical, but sharing ourselves in these contexts are often presented as being that way. And then once I started moving towards a relational caring philosophy in my music therapy work, it was a shift between, instead of me using music and long-term care to, improve memory recall, it was more, what music can I play today where maybe I get to learn something about someone else and they can learn more about me. And that was a really big shift. Yeah.
That is the perfect unplanned segue into the next slide, actually, Taylor.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing with the story. That leads us into, the use of arts in relational caring really beautifully. And this is also where I will say I personally feel very spoiled. My entry into this field was in a relational setting. And in an arts-based setting. So I, unlike Taylor, don't have that same contrast to really share a story about. But what I will say is that, recreation type settings, such as the Beethoven method, which is where I currently work and have worked for many years, is a really, really special place to start exploring relationality and relational caring, because we are already a little less clinical than maybe some other settings might be. And the whole point of relational caring is, returning to those relationships, tending to those relationships. And in our context, we're lucky because we really can see the relationship as the goal. So we're not there to improve someone's memory. We're not there to help someone improve in kind of tangible ways. There's no assessment. It really is about getting to know each other and building those relationships in a meaningful way. And I will say, we're very lucky that that's a possibility for us. I would like to think that that's a possibility anywhere we go if we kind of make tweaks and work at it. And so we use the arts really with that goal as kind of at the forefront of what we do. And the way that we look at the arts in a relational setting is that it is it's an added vehicle for getting to know another, for self-expression in contexts where maybe you have barriers to expressing yourself in the way we typically expect. So if somebody has like some aphasia or, other troubles around language, visual arts or music, you can still express yourself in an embodied way, in a creative way. And we see that as just as valuable as anything verbal. So we definitely see that the music, as Taylor was mentioning, is incredibly important for that. As Dawn mentioned, I'm a visual artist, so that is kind of my personal specialty around it. And I always try to look at it as it's the process, not the results. So I'm also not hoping that everybody in the room is going to make a beautiful painting. If they do and they're proud of it, we will celebrate that and it will be exciting. But even if we just play with paint, or one of my favorite things is a lot of time people are resistant to painting if they've never identified as an artist before, right? I'm sure somebody in this Zoom room has even once said, you know, I couldn't draw to save my life. That's okay too. I often call people my art director, and I just get them to tell me what color to put down next. What flower am I adding to this bouquet? And there's room for collaboration there. There's room for it to be multiple people working on the same piece. So again, really leaning into the possibilities that arts offer us to engage in different ways. It can get funny, it can get, you know, emotional. It can really take us to all the different corners of like the human experience. And that is the beauty of the arts. And so now we have a little video, which I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I have it set up in a funny way. And then we are going to, Taylor, did you have the link for that pulled up already?
I should have. No, but I can get it in
link.
1 second video.
Well, I'll describe the video if Taylor,
I'll
can
get it
pull
up.
that up.
Yep.
The video is it's the trailer for a documentary that was made in our old space. So this was, we used to be called the Dotsa Bittove Wellness Academy. The Bittove method is sort of a new iteration of that work that happened after we were closed down due to the pandemic. And so we shifted to online programming, which is actually the story that Taylor is going to go through with you and the research that came out of that experience shortly after we watched the video. But this was a documentary that was made specifically around music in the space and how music was meaningful to people in our space. And it's really, I'm biased because it's special to me. There's people that I have known for years and that I used to know in it. But I think it does a really good job at showing kind of the overall atmosphere and energy of how we would use music specifically in the space, but all arts in the space. So hopefully it gives you just a little bit of a taste without just taking my word for it.
And I got the video. So
Thanks, Taylor.
No problem. 1 second here. Is that showing up for everybody? Okay, and I'm just going to play 1 second and you'll tell me if you can hear it.
Robert?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
To fill in the blank. Music is
soul connection. Music is a message sent to the brain to enjoy happiness.
Makes you happy and takes the sad part away.
music plays a role in everything we do here.
I don't know where I'd be without music, really.
I invited Simon to create a song on musical engagement and the meaning of music in our lives.
You know, I see all the time how important this is to folks here. But we're going to write a song about this. You know, we're going to write a song about music itself.
The great thing about music with dementia is that there are many broken connections with dementia, but there are just millions and billions of connections in there that are not damaged. But if you engage with music, all of a sudden those connections are still very powerful, and they open doors to memories, to speech, to engagement in ways that you are unable to do with more traditional interactions.
Music, to me, is like when you're eating a nice piece of cake or something. It just comes to me and I just love it.
Our intention here is to create a space where relationships are in the fore, where they're most important.
We believe that a person is a person, not a person is a patient.
We focus so intently on disease, on what is missing, that we only see the person from that very narrow lens of disease, disability, decline. And we tend to rush to medications when there are many other non-medical solutions that can help people to live better.
We are people relating to people, using the arts to build a bridge and create relationships that are meaningful, respectful, dignified, loving.
So that's our that's our vibe at our space, to put it simply. So yeah, I think, the things that I love in that video, it was a research-based video. So some of the speakers, were addressing some of what we're talking about today around what the goals are, what the feelings are around the space and how we use it. And we are continuing that work today at the Beethoven method, and we have much of the same artists still on the team. So it's a continuation of the work, and we're very fortunate that we get to practice in this way. We have this a strong awareness of all the challenges to working in this way, which we experience both in person and online, which is what Taylor's going to kind of explore, is like some of the benefits and pros and cons that came out of the study around around trying to bring that same energy and that same beauty around the relationships and around those connections into an online space when we didn't have any other options. So Taylor, unless you wanted to add something else, I'm just going to hand the torch to you.
No, I am all set up and ready to go. Yeah, so the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk about the study that we did exploring that transition from the in-person to the online space. And I didn't write this here. In the spirit of being relational, I actually have shingles right now, and I am so itchy and tired, and I left out a few things in the presentation, I realize right now. But this study was done with myself and Katia, Sherry Dupuis, who's my supervisor at the University of Waterloo, Eden Champagne, Stephanie Stay. I will put all the names for everybody after. But it was a very collaborative experience and a very collaborative project. And so the title is The Beethoven Method, the experiences of transitioning relational caring principles to an online platform. And so the research questions for this study were the challenges. What were the challenges of embedding relational caring principles and relational arts online? How artists, collaborators, and leaders at the Beethoven Method embedded relational caring principles and relational arts into the virtual space, the possibilities of relational caring in virtual art spaces, and recommendations that they had for other organizations who were doing this of how to embed relational arts online. So we'll start here with the challenges. And at first, so there was a lot of skepticism when people from the in-person to the online space. So like Katia said, there was a lot of skepticism around, how were artists and collaborators going to bring that energy into a virtual platform? And at first, a lot of the artists and collaborators, and I should actually give a bit of context, what a collaborator is. So in the in-person space, there was an artist doing a program, and they would have a first follower who were there as a second pair of hands to help facilitate the program. In the online space, the role was changed to a collaborator, and they were there to help with technology, so getting up videos, helping an extra pair of hands, both on the technological side and also discussions and facilitating that, and just being there to support the artist. So a very relational relationship between artist and collaborator. Okay, so at first there was a lot of discomfort with technology. So even after how many years has it been since the pandemic, I still cannot figure out Zoom. And so a lot of artists were really feeling this discomfort around navigating Zoom and also leading their programs. A lot of people also said there was a lot more planning required to facilitate sessions, whereas in the in-person space, there was more of an improvisational flow to programs. So you would, not that there would be no planning, but artists were saying how they would go into the space and sort of feel what everyone was feeling that day. Whereas in the online space, artists were saying they had to be very intentional about what their programming was, so programs didn't fall flat. And so it took a lot more planning. There was also a lot of limitations with this two-dimensional Zoom setting. So for example, artists who would do movement classes, I don't know if you can see me because I can't see myself of what I'm doing, but people who would do movement classes were saying it was hard to do movement because you could only see from the waist up or the shoulders up. So whereas in the in-person space, you have access to all these movements that you can do, it was sort of limiting in that way. There were also other two-dimensional limitations, but I lost my place, so give me 1 second. Oh, yeah.
No touch, lack of
No,
touch.
yeah. There was no touch. So a big relational component in person was this concept of hugging and holding hands and dancing together. And that was really lost online. And it was such an integral component to the in-person space. And a lot of artists and collaborators, I felt, were really grieving that. It was also very difficult to read body language online and facial expressions. Sometimes that got lost, where in person, people talked a lot about this energy that would happen, where you could feel energies in person that were really difficult over a screen. And lastly, a lot of sound limitations. So artists were saying how sometimes it was difficult to navigate group relational discussions because people would talk over each other because they didn't know when someone else was about to speak. And then singing together, sing-alongs and singing together, as we saw in the video, was such a prominent part of the in-person space. And doing that online is impossible. An artist said to me, "We've figured out how to get to the moon, but we can't figure out how to sing together on Zoom." And it's true. So that was really, really difficult in terms of artists who are doing music in their programs. Okay, so there were so many creative ways that artists and collaborators brought relational caring principles and relational arts into the online space. So we're going to talk about some of those now. So one thing that artists and collaborators really emphasized was the importance of intentionally drawing on relational caring principles. So they mentioned the importance of embracing silence. So not jumping in with a conversation whenever there was a lull. So really just giving space to that, to slow down their program, to give people time to respond. So a lot of people mention this slower sort of movement in classes online. And a lot of artists felt a bit uncomfortable with that at first, that letting the silence breathe almost. And they got more comfortable because they saw the importance of that as they went on. So being patient with that was really important. Also being curious about what people were saying. So for example, if somebody brought in a story about their favorite piece of art, it was really important to ask curious questions about that. So, why do you love this piece of art? Tell us more about this. So that genuine relational curiosity was really important online. Something I didn't mention that I will mention now is that artists mentioned the importance of repetition that was not as prominent in the in-person space. So if a member said something, they would make sure to repeat it so the whole group could hear. Am I missing anything in that part, Katia, or does that sound okay? Okay, something that's really important in person and online was following the lead of members and what they wanted to do and being very improvisational in that. So there was a quote from one of the participants in the study that I'll read that said, just really being mindful of what's going on. It's not my agenda. For example, if we need to stop and play a funny video, that's okay. Maybe my agenda goes out the window, and if we don't move for the rest of the time because we go somewhere down a different path, that's okay. It's kind of like being in the moment, being flexible, allowing the energy of the room or Zoom room to drive what's happening. So if everyone's really into movement, great. And if they're not, that's fine. Being authentic and vulnerable, it's such a core element of relational caring that is so prominent in the in-person space. One of the participants shared a really beautiful moment they had online. They said, I think one of my presentations, I did an homage to my father who passed away during COVID. And I think I had tears, and I think the connection was real. I could feel that they felt my sadness. I just felt human. Artists and collaborators also really spoke about the importance of working collaboratively together and with other team members. So this was seen in weekly huddles that team members would have, where they could sort of unpack what was going on in their classes and talk about ways to be more relational online. I remember in one of the huddles, I observed they were talking about, how it might be difficult to facilitate relational discussions when people are jumping over each other. So how do we mindfully maybe mute somebody so somebody else can be heard? And everybody was giving their advice and working together to come up with a solution to that. Artists and collaborators also talked about really utilizing Zoom to their benefit to facilitate these relational moments. So, for example, screen sharing and spotlighting. So some artists would share their screen to write song lyrics as a group. So for example, an artist shared how they used to use a big sheet of paper in person and would write the lyrics like that in the middle of the group. And in the online space, they would share their screen with a blank sheet and write lyrics like that. Another artist would hook up their iPad and have that as a guest in the Zoom meeting, and it would be a blank canvas, and have people share with them, you know, what they wanted the art piece to look like, and they would draw that. Some artists talked about the importance of spotlighting people. So if two members were trying to talk to each other, spotlighting them, so you just saw those two people, and that would really help encourage them to keep speaking. Let's see. Oh, also investing in equipment to improve sound quality. So a lot of artists brought microphones that they would use, especially artists who were doing music, because a lot of the times the computer, the microphones on the computer, it can be very distorted when you're singing. So investing in those microphones to have better sound quality. Other artists actually put up artwork in their background of their Zoom screen to make their background more appealing for people around them, and sort of create this like artistic vibe for the class. I remember some artists had these beautiful sort of like mood lights in the background and paintings up, and it was really incredible to see. So for a lot of artists and collaborators shared a lot of creative ways to engage specifically in relational arts online. So some artists were saying how in person, a class would be really structured around one art form. So music or dance or visual arts. Whereas in the online space, they found that sometimes using different art forms in one class really helped with this creative flow. So maybe the group started with, you know, writing a poem, and then use that as a way to be inspired for a visual piece of artwork together. As we said before, the touch is really important and was really important in the in-person space. So one of the artists shared how they try to mimic physical touch that they had in the physical space online. So I don't know if you can see my hand, but she was telling me how she would ask somebody to put out their hand and then ask somebody else to reach out for their hand. I can't see where my hand is in the camera, so I won't do a good job of it. But it was a way to sort of mimic that physical touch. And obviously it wasn't the same, but it's just ways that we can create these relational connections online. And then this is probably my favorite part, was how artists really utilize people's homes in creating art together and engaging relationally together. So there's an example that an artist gave that I really liked. She said, we were singing New York, New York, and I asked people to get something for a microphone. And one of the women had a spatula, and we were all laughing together and singing into these microphones. And it was really a lot of fun that we could engage in that together. Another example, so I'm also an artist at the Beethoven Method, and I remember one day somebody had a doll that she would always be holding during class. And the theme for that day was music that was important from our childhood. And so together we used the doll as a segue to maybe write a lullaby. And together we wrote a lullaby for this doll and sang it to the doll together as a group. Artists would also ask care partners to help members bring something from their home that was meaningful to them. And that would also oftentimes facilitate a lot of relational discussion. So one person in the group would often bring in their clarinet and play clarinet. And that was really interesting to see and really beautiful, and was a way for him to share a part of himself with the group. You can go to the next slide, sorry. Okay, so what was interesting is that going into this study, I sort of felt like, you know, I didn't really think there would be many possibilities of doing relational arts online. And it was really amazing and inspiring to see, you know, how inspirational people found this process to be. And one of the biggest things that came out of this was this feeling of deepened relationships between team members and participants, between participants and their care partners. And I'm going to talk about a few of them now. So a lot of artists and collaborators said that having access into people's homes really promoted a greater sense of intimacy and relationality. So somebody said, now virtually, the space is our own home. We're in the homes of the members and they're in the homes of the presenters. And that's a very personal, amazing thing. So I think bringing them into my home, they ask you questions like, what's that keyboard? And what's that painting? I also have 2 cats, and I'll bring up the cats to show them. I'm not going to bring my cat to the physical space. Artists also shared how doing online programming also create an opportunity for care partners to witness relational caring and relational arts. And that oftentimes would facilitate relational moments between themselves and members. So I'll read a quote that somebody said. They said, the other day, one of our artists was doing a music program and a member was there with their daughter, and the artist was sharing a song that he had created for his mom who had passed away. It was a sad song reminiscing about what his mom had said to him before she passed. And then they were together, the mother and daughter, and you can see that they were having a really intimate moment with each other, where they were hearing the song and then listening to it. And they had this eye contact. And then at one point, the member touched her daughter's face and they were staring at each other, and they were really able to create a really beautiful moment together. And what was really interesting is that in the in-person space, oftentimes care partners didn't come. So they weren't able to really witness what relational arts and relational caring looks like in practice. You can go to the next slide. So I was really surprised by this, but a lot of artists talked about becoming better artists and creating better art online. So one artist shared that the online space allowed them to create finished art pieces with members, something that was more difficult to accomplish in the in-person space. So what they would do is finish the painting online with everybody and then email it out so everyone would have a copy of it. Other artists shared that the intentionality required in the online space resulted in creating better art. So for one example, one artist shared that the songs and lyrics they wrote were actually a lot better than in the in-person space, and really accredited that to the intentionality required online. You can go to the next one. So artists and collaborators also shared the possibilities of accessibility of online relational arts programming. So for example, the Beethoven method online now could be accessed from anywhere in the world. It didn't just need to be people from Toronto. It was also really important because people don't need to leave their homes. If somebody's not feeling well, or if they're having an issue getting to a place, or just really not feeling able to go in person, they could still engage relationally online. And lastly, it was also less financially strenuous on both the organization and participants. So for participants, it didn't cost as much money to attend online programming. And then with hybrid programming, what was exciting is this potential of doing both in-person and virtual at the same time, which sort of allowed for programming to work around individual needs. And you can go to the next slide. So lastly, artists, collaborators, and leaders all shared recommendations for what is required to do online relational arts programming. So number one, they said, find innovative ways to get to know your members who will be attending each session. So what the Beethoven method began to do was to ask new members to fill out a questionnaire about their interests so artists could incorporate them into their classes. And then they also had a weekly sign-up sheet so artists could know who was attending their classes and plan their program around that. As we said before, it was really important to intentionally embed relational caring philosophy into all aspects of the program. So not just between artists and members, but between artists and other artists, between all staff members. And what that looks like is a real feeling of mutual support and care, and not a hierarchical system where you're told what to do, but that everyone's opinions are valid and we all learn and grow in relationship with one another. They also shared the importance of making weekly huddles, as they provide an important space for collaborative learning and modeling of relational caring. So in these huddles, like I said before, artists would really take the time to learn from one another, to create new ideas of what to do in programs, and just really work through some things that they were finding challenging. And lastly, online relational arts programming requires a real specific shift in thinking and doing. So like we saw before, it's not about performing. It's not about trying to change somebody. It's not about trying to, you know, like I said before, as what I used to do of working on memory recall or any of those things. It's about being in the moment with somebody, having them get to know you, getting to know them, and really engaging together in the arts. And I'm going to stop sharing here. I almost just left the meeting. Hold on. Oh, no, because Katia, you're sharing. That's why. Thank you. And hopefully we have a few minutes for questions. Sorry, Dawn, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. I was just realizing that I mean, you packed a lot of information into.
I realize that now. Yeah,
It's
I'm
great.
sorry.
No, it's wonderful. I don't know about others, but my head is reeling just actually reflecting on in a good way, on the ways that people have actually adapted, to be honest, right? I was fascinated about, you know, kind of the way that you contrasted which went better, you know, which things actually were enhanced by the onlearn and the intentionality. And I guess that's kind of, forefront in my mind, because of course the music care approach is the intentional use of music, right? So I just kind of found an interesting connection. I have some questions, but I'll also open it up to others if there are others that wanted to throw a question in the chat, because I don't want to dominate what I'm thinking about rather than the group. So I'll open it right now to folks. Is there anybody out there that has a specific question that relates to maybe where you work or how this intersects with your care space or your life or your scope of practice, however. Any questions? Okay, so then I'll just jump in because I do have a few myself. So in terms of the dance, I really did like when you, and maybe because you've stopped sharing, and I'm only saying this because actually I attended one of the sessions virtually, but is there a way that was the one thing when you were describing that it was lost because of the PowerPoint and then just how, but is there a way that you could sort of show that what you were talking about in terms of sense of touch?
For sure. So actually, Mary Fridley's here. We do a lot of this stuff in reimagining dementia as well. And just these ideas of everyone like reaching in and giving each other a hug over Zoom, or I'm going to put my hand up, like Dawn, reach for my hand, Katia, reach for my hand. An artist was saying that you reach through the screen, and Katia, if you reach through the screen to try to touch my hand, I think it would be your other hand. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, these sorts of ideas.
I don't think we're in the same order is the only problem, because I was reaching for your hand.
Well, anyway, so things like that. Somebody wrote in the...
Yes, and I'll just pause on that because I just want to say to everybody on the call that if you're like, it is really effective, because I was in a space where everybody was actually camera on and doing this. And it really was amazing how it enabled the feeling through your screen, through your device, to actually imitate that there was contact. So I just kind of want to throw it out there. And then, yes, the question, I have difficulties with interacting with my employer, dementia with deafness despite hearing aids. Writing is cumbersome. Other thoughts anyone has to be relational?
That is a great question.
My instinct is, Kathy, thank you for asking this question. My instinct is that it would really have to depend on what your relationship is like with your employer. And that can be a really tricky one, especially if they aren't coming from a relational standpoint, because it really does take two, at least two. But one thing I mean, my recommendation always is, like, we've talked a lot about vulnerability, and it is very vulnerable, and it can be a real shame to have to be the one to model the vulnerability if you're not getting it in return. But being vulnerable and just expressing it to your employer, like, hey, this, like, I would like to find a solution that isn't writing, and here's why. That's kind of where my instinct to that question goes, because it is very situational, and the solution itself will be based on your relationship. You said it's very, very friendly, like another daughter. Oh, well then, yeah, just be vulnerable and maybe ask to try out some solutions. We're big advocates for give it a try. What's the worst that can happen, really? Give it a try, see how it goes. And part of relationality and relational caring is knowing none of us are perfect either. So even as quote unquote practitioners, facilitators, artists, whatever position, whatever language we want to use for that, you're going to have off days too. You're going to try something that maybe doesn't work, and you just learn from that as a team. And yeah, I don't know if that helps at all. What about, you have any thoughts, Taylor?
Well, I was just thinking, maybe you could even try bringing art into the mix, like, can you listen to a song together? Can you dance together? Can you sing together? Can you hold somebody's hand? All of these things are ways of communication that we often sort of dismiss as communication. She can't type, she can't hear. Okay, so then maybe, yeah, that physical touch, right? So holding hands, right? Yeah. Preset word on cards. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually an artist said in their online programs, what they would do is they would write out questions on a card and hold it up to the screen. You could do that in real life too, questions on cards, and see how people respond, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we see that happen a lot at our in-person. So for like a full disclosure, we are back to in-person programming with the Bitove method. And we found that was really where our community was leaning towards. So again, always aiming to meet their needs and wants and kind of going with that. And we do see that really often, that cards with questions and cards with words, or like a visual prompt, but pre-made, and even it's just something tangible that they can hold too, right? Like there's a lot of dimensions to the card that makes it a really good tool if it works for you.
Great. That's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. I'm wondering too, just because we talk about person-centered care so much and relational care, could you just go kind of make that connection on how they're different one more time before? I think that it was a really great point that you made. And so I would love maybe to dive into that a bit.
Katia, do you want me to do it? Do you want to? Whatever.
I love this topic. So
yeah.
I can dig into that
yes.
one. So person-centered care is a really interesting one because it, in my opinion, it has all the best intentions. And there's overlap for sure, where there is an element of wanting to get to know that person and understand them as a person and what their needs are, but it does kind of alienate that person still. And it doesn't include their family necessarily. It doesn't include other care partners they may have. And it doesn't include yourself as someone in relationship with them in that moment. And so relational caring just kind of expands on that view of the person as an island and looks instead of the person as basically being a series of relationships, right? There's a lot of relational theory in like deeper ways outside of care too, that just look at human beings as being comprised of relationships. So it kind of expands on that. But it also, we talk a lot about what relational caring can do for the individuals who are quote unquote receiving care. But it really is also for people who are working. So people who are paid care partners, people who are family care partners, whatever. I always struggle with the labels to make it clear what I'm talking about without making it very unrelational language. But it's looking at, you know, their needs as being as valuable as the other person's needs. And, you know, we see so much about how people in care settings are underpaid, under-resourced, like not respected enough, undervalued. So relational caring also does try to bring them into the fold and view it as, if we're not caring for our care partners, then how are they going to care for others, or care with others? But yeah, so I think that's as simple as I can actually go with that description.
Yeah. And there's a sheet somewhere that I have. I'm writing about this currently in my dissertation, but sort of the differences and tangible examples. So there's one that says, you know, relational caring is not feeding somebody, but eating with, right? So, right. There were some other ones on that sheet that I can't remember now, but
I love the one, Taylor, where it said it's not about just putting clothes on somebody, it's about dressing them for the day ahead.
Yes.
And what
it's
the
not about
kind of day they want to
dressing,
have.
dressing for the day. Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, you know, with person-centered care, I'm not required to put myself into it as long as I'm attending to like the needs or the perceptive wants of that person, then I'm doing my job. And so sometimes what we find is that it's really easy to still, you know, pathologize and to medicalize somebody, but have it situated in person-centered care because you're still drawing on the needs of that person. Whereas in relational caring, I'm also required to put myself into relationship with somebody. Yeah.
That said, with the caveat that doesn't mean you're going to like everybody.
Yeah.
I think that's a really something I come up against a lot when I talk about relational caring is it starts painting this really lovely picture of like harmony and community and connection. And it's true. And there is so much potential and beauty in that. And we're lucky to find that in little pockets and corners, but it does not mean that there's no conflict. And it does not mean that there's no relationships that just don't click the same way that I'm not going to be friends with everybody in the world. It's true for work. Like I'm not going to be friends with everybody at work. But it's allowing for that too. And knowing that you also have your own boundaries. I mean, within context or within reason, but I just want to throw that little caveat out there. There is also that side of it.
Yes, I like that you speak about the importance of taking care of the relationship environment in all areas of our lives. I agree. That's a fantastic reflection and a comment on the discussion that you facilitated, for us. I also, what I wanted to say too, that struck me about the teaching side, because online programming, or when you're programming, essentially you're facilitating and teaching. It's very, very similar. And I loved your point about going with the flow of the Zoom room. Right? Like how sometimes, I mean, it's funny, but, you know, you can come with the very best, you know, laid out plan and lesson plan or whatever, and it falls flat in person and also virtually. So I also wanted to bring forward that comment because I thought it was really important about reading the room or creating space, because again, that also leans into the fact that there's this energy, even though we're virtual.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and being attentive to that and being prepared or being open to shifting in the moment. And it's okay. And sort of a lot of artists talked about, you know, letting go of these plans that they came up with before and letting go of that sometimes in, you know, to really just follow where people were at. Yeah.
I have to say, I think I may have learned the most from our dramatic arts people on the team. Right. You know, if I think about specific skills that I've really picked up through this work that weren't something I already brought, I think that's possibly the most valuable is like improv training, basically, and learning and witnessing them do their improv so beautifully. And we have some amazing improv people on the team. And I see that leak into, you know, how I do my visual arts programs now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. I'm just looking at, I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And again, thank you to both of you for, for your ideas and the connection and the, just the information that you gave to us. I think it's important too, even the different terminology. We talk about person-centered care, relational care. I mean, you really brought a lot to us, but I'm going to, for those of you, this is just a fun FYI, when the pandemic hit, many of the major arts organizations around Toronto and then extended beyond that got together to consolidate virtual programming on something called Arts at Home. So I'm just going to drop that in the chat. I haven't been on it for a little while, but when we were discussing, it reminded me of that resource that has come into my life. And so it's all areas of the art, dance, media, music, theater, and more. And it's a lot for teaching, but again, it can be used by anyone out there, family planning, caregiving, ideas, generating, and just to get new ideas for yourselves. So thank you for the inspiration. And just a little reminder, if you need, if you would like the certificate for CEUs, just email Tanya, who sent you the link, or info@musiccare.org. And again, it's always a joy to have both of you in this integrated arts kind of way.
Thank you so much for having us. Yes.
Yes.
Katia put the website to the Beethoven method in here in case you want to learn more about it. And it's such a wonderful program. So thank you so much for having us. It's always so nice to be able to talk about these things. And thank you all for being here today.
Yeah. Enjoy your afternoon. Be well, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Enjoy the sunshine if it's sunny where you are.
While it lasts.
Bye.